I had learned to love the silence of the Vatican archives, not the peaceful silence of prayer, but the heavy, suffocating silence of shame. It pressed down on me like the weight of the 14,000 manuscripts that surrounded my desk, each one authenticated by careful hands more trustworthy than mine. My name is Lucas Croft, and I was a forger, not in the dramatic sense. I hadn't created some elaborate medieval hoax or penned a false gospel. My sin was smaller, more pathetic. 6 years ago, I had certified a 3rd century papyrus fragment as genuine when I knew it was a 17th century forgery. The collector who had donated it to the church was a powerful man, a benefactor of missions across Africa. My superior had looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Sometimes, Father Croft, we must weigh the good that can be done against the purity of our methods." I had signed the certificate. The fragment now sat in a display case in Munich, labeled as authentic, and I sat here, in the lowest level of the archives, cataloging donations that no one would ever see under fluorescent lights that hummed like wasps trapped in a jar. Redemption. The word had become my private prayer, whispered into the darkness of my cell each night. I wanted it so badly I could taste it, bitter as communion wine, sharp as the wafer against my tongue. The church was merciful, Cardinal Verendi had told me, but mercy required proof of worthiness. So I waited and I catalogued, and I tried not to look at my own reflection in the glass cases. The call came on a Tuesday. "Father Croft." Verendi's voice crackled through the old telephone on my desk, making me flinch. "My office, immediately." I climbed 4 flights of stairs, my cassock whispering against the stone. The higher levels of the Vatican were different. Sunlight streaming through ancient windows, the smell of incense and beeswax, the distant murmur of tourists in the Sistine Chapel. I had forgotten how beautiful it was up here. How far I had fallen. Cardinal Verendi's office was all dark wood and darker leather. He sat behind a desk that had been old when Napoleon was young, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. At 63, he had the face of a Renaissance painting, sharp angles and cold intelligence. His eyes, when they finally lifted to meet mine, held no warmth. "Sit," I sat. He slid a thin file across the desk. "Jerusalem, the Church of the Forgotten Martyr. Have you heard of it?" "No, Your Eminence." "Good, very few have." He leaned back in his chair, and it creaked like old bones. 3 weeks ago, an archaeological team working in the crypt discovered something unexpected. They broke through into a deeper level, much deeper. Byzantine construction, perhaps older the Israeli Antiquities Authority was prepared to continue the excavation, but... He paused, his fingers drumming once against the wood. "The team has gone silent." I opened the file photographs of a small, crumbling church. Personnel files. I recognized the lead archaeologist's name immediately. Dr. Eris Thorne, brilliant and controversial, known for her work on early Christian sites. Her photo showed a woman in her late 30s with sharp eyes and dust in her dark hair. "Silent, Your Eminence." "No communication in 8 days. The site has been secured by the Israeli police, but they're allowing us to investigate first as a courtesy." The way he said the word made it clear that significant pressure had been applied. "You will go to Jerusalem. You will assess the site. You will determine if there is anything of theological significance that the church needs to be aware of, and you will report back to me directly, no one else." My heart hammered against my ribs. An assignment. A real assignment. "Of course. When do I leave?" "Tonight." He stood, signaling the end of our meeting. I rose as well, clutching the file to my chest like a shield. At the door, his voice stopped me. "Father Croft." I turned. "Some knowledge serves God," he said, his eyes boring into mine, "and some serves other purposes. Remember which master you serve." The words followed me all the way to the airport. On the flight to Tel Aviv, I read Dr. Thorne's excavation reports. Her writing was precise, academic, excited. The Church of the Forgotten Martyr had been built in the 7th century on top of earlier ruins. The crypt contained 3 burial chambers, all thoroughly documented and unremarkable, standard Byzantine construction, Christian symbols, nothing unexpected. Then, in her final week, the tone shifted. Day 19. We found an anomaly in the eastern wall. The stonework is wrong, too old, too precise. Ground-penetrating radar shows a void beyond, at least 30 meters deep. This doesn't match any known construction in this area. I've requested permission to proceed. Day 21. Permission granted. We broke through this morning. There's a shaft, almost perfectly vertical. The air that came out was warm. That shouldn't be possible at this depth. David thinks it's geothermal, but the temperature in Jerusalem's bedrock is constant. This is something else. Day 23. We've set up lights and a pulley system. The shaft descends at least 40 meters before opening into what appears to be a chamber. The walls are smooth, almost glass-like. I've never seen construction like this. We're going down tomorrow. The final entry was dated 5 days before the communication ceased. Day 25. We found a door that should not exist, that was all. No further explanation. No description. Just those 7 words, written in handwriting that had become jagged and hurried. I stared at those words as the plane began its descent into Tel Aviv. In the window's reflection, I looked pale, older than my 46 years. A door that should not exist. What did that mean? Jerusalem welcomed me with heat and dust. A driver from the church's local office took me through the winding streets of the old city as the sun set, painting the ancient stones gold and amber. We stopped outside a small, forgotten church wedged between a hostel and a closed pottery shop. A chain-link fence had been erected around it, and 2 Israeli police officers stood guard at the entrance. Inside the fence, a man in tactical gear waited. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the posture of someone who had spent years in the military. His hair was steel gray, cut short. "Sergeant Vale," he said, not offering his hand. "I'm heading security for the Vatican's interests here. You're the investigator?" "Father Lucas Croft." I showed him my credentials. He barely glanced at them. "The site's been sealed since the police found it abandoned. No one in or out except essential personnel. That's you and me." He handed me a hard hat and a high-powered flashlight. "The church is structurally sound. The crypt is standard. Everything below that." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I went down once, to the first chamber. I didn't like it." "Why?" He looked at me, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not fear. Vale didn't seem like a man who feared much, but discomfort. "The air's wrong. Smells sweet, metallic, and it's warm down there. Shouldn't be." The same detail from Thorne's notes. My stomach tightened. We entered the church. It was small, dim, smelling of old stone and pigeon droppings. Vale led me to a door behind the altar, then down worn stone steps into the crypt. Here, the Byzantine construction was evident. Arched ceilings, Christian symbols carved into the walls, empty burial niches. At the eastern end, a gaping hole had been cut through the wall, revealing modern scaffolding and work lights that ran on a generator. "How deep?" I asked. 43 meters to the first chamber, then it goes deeper." Vale stopped at the edge of the hole. "Your call, Father. I can come with you, or you can go alone." I looked down into the shaft. The work lights illuminated smooth, dark stone that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. A metal ladder had been bolted to the wall. Somewhere far below, I could see a faint glow from the chamber. "I'll go alone," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Vale nodded, unsurprised. Radio check every 15 minutes. If I don't hear from you, I'm coming down. I clipped the radio to my belt, tested my flashlight, and began to descend. The ladder was solid, professionally installed. I counted rungs to distract myself from the growing pressure in my ears. 50 rungs, 100. The temperature was rising, Vale was right. It was warm, growing warmer with each meter. The air tasted strange on my tongue, sweet and metallic, like copper mixed with honey. At 143 rungs, my feet touched solid ground. I stood in the first chamber, and my breath caught in my throat. The walls were smooth, almost polished, made of dark stone I didn't recognize. The Byzantine construction above had been rough, human, imperfect. This was something else entirely. The precision was unsettling. Work lights on portable stands illuminated the space. I could see the archaeologists' equipment scattered everywhere. Laptops still open, cameras on tripods, a folding table covered with maps and notebooks. Coffee mugs sat beside a camping stove. It looked like everyone had simply stood up and walked away mid-task. But there were no people. Vale, I'm in the first chamber, I radioed up. No sign of the team yet. Static, then his voice. Copy that. 15 minutes. I moved through the equipment, my flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. The chamber was roughly circular, perhaps 20 meters across. On the far side, another opening yawned, this one natural, or appearing natural, though the edges were too smooth. A rope had been secured at the entrance with professional climbing gear. Dr. Thorne's notebook lay open on the table. I picked it up, my hands trembling slightly. Her handwriting filled the pages. Measurements, sketches of symbols, observations. I flipped to the final entries. Day 26. The chamber below is vast. We've only mapped a fraction of it. The walls are covered in carvings. Angels, but wrong somehow. Their faces are covered, their wings spread not in glory, but in mourning. David says they look like they're weeping. The central feature is a pool of dark water that reflects no light. We're setting up camp below tomorrow to continue documentation day 27. Found something in the western tunnel. A room sealed with a door of pure iron. No rust, no deterioration. The symbols on it are older than anything I've ever seen. Marcus translated some of it. It's a warning, but not the kind we expected. Not stay out, but what lies within must remain. We're going to open it tomorrow. Day 28. We shouldn't have opened the door. We shouldn't have... The entry ended mid-sentence, the pen dragging across the page as if her hand had been pulled away. I felt cold despite the warmth. My radio crackled. Father Croft, status. I'm fine. Going deeper. I didn't wait for Vale's response. I clipped onto the rope and began to descend into the second opening. The walls here were different. They weren't stone anymore, or if they were, it was stone that had been subjected to impossible heat and pressure. They were smooth as glass, black as midnight, and in my flashlight's beam they seemed to shimmer with faint patterns, like oil on water or heat rising from summer asphalt. The descent was longer than I expected. The rope seemed to go on forever, and the chamber above became a distant point of light. The warmth increased until sweat ran down my spine. My breathing echoed strangely, as if the space around me was much larger than it should be. Then my feet touched ground again, and I turned. The chamber was impossible. It stretched out before me like a cathedral, but wrong. The proportions were subtly off. The angles didn't quite meet as they should. The ceiling vanished into darkness far above, though I knew we were deep underground. The walls were covered in the carvings Thorne had described, angels with their hands covering their faces, their wings spread in postures of grief or shame between them. Text in languages I didn't recognize, and some I did. Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Arabic, all mixed together, all telling the same story in different tongues. In the center of the chamber was the pool. It was perhaps 10 meters across, filled with liquid so black it seemed to absorb light itself. The surface was perfectly still. Around the pool, I saw the archaeologists' camp, sleeping bags arranged in a circle, more equipment, a portable altar where someone had placed a small cross, and beyond the pool, built into the far wall, I saw what they had found. The iron door stood 3 meters tall, covered in symbols that hurt to look at. It was open, Not just unlocked, but standing wide open, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. The stairs were made of the same glassy black stone as the walls. They spiraled downward in a perfect helix, and they looked like they went down forever. My radio crackled with static. I lifted it to respond, but only white noise came out. The signal was dead. I should have turned back. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to climb back up, to report to Vale, to get help, but I thought of Cardinal Verendi's words, of my 6 years in the archives, of the chance for redemption that I had been given. I thought of Dr. Thorne's final words. We shouldn't have opened the door, and I thought, but you did, and now I have to know why. I stepped through the iron doorway and onto the first stair. The darkness swallowed my flashlight beam after 3 meters. I descended slowly, counting steps. 10, 20, 50. The temperature continued to rise 100 steps. The walls seemed to pulse with faint, rhythmic light, like a heartbeat. 200 steps. The stairs should have brought me far below the level of the chamber above, far below anything that should exist beneath Jerusalem. But they kept going, spiraling down and down into impossible depth. The air was thick and warm, pressing against my skin like invisible hands. My flashlight flickered. I shook it, and the beam steadied, but I knew it wouldn't last much longer. 300 steps. I stopped, breathing hard, and looked up. The doorway was invisible now, lost in the darkness above. I looked down. The stairs continued, vanishing into black infinity. This is deeper than it should be, I thought, my hands shaking. This is wrong. This is impossible. But I didn't turn back. God help me. I kept descending, step after step, into the warm darkness, toward whatever waited at the bottom of the world. I lost count of the steps somewhere after 400. My flashlight died at step 372. I stood in absolute darkness, my hand pressed against the glassy wall, feeling the warmth pulse beneath my palm like a living thing. I fumbled for my backup light with shaking fingers, nearly dropping it twice before the beam finally cut through the black. The stairs continued downward, endless, impossible. I should have turned back then. I knew it, even as I kept descending, each step taking me deeper into a space that violated every law of geology and architecture. I understood Jerusalem sat on limestone bedrock. There should have been aquifers, ancient cisterns, maybe natural caves. There should not have been this throat of smooth stone swallowing me into the earth's core. At some point, I realized I could see without my flashlight. The walls themselves were glowing, faintly, barely perceptible, but growing stronger with each step, a soft, blue-white luminescence that seemed to come from within the stone itself, like moonlight trapped in glass. I switched off my light to confirm I wasn't hallucinating. The glow remained, casting no shadows, illuminating nothing but itself. My breathing sounded too loud in the silence, too fast. I forced myself to slow down, to count each breath. 1, 2, 3. The air tasted strange, not stale like a tomb should be, but fresh somehow, with that same sweet metallic tang that had grown stronger the deeper I descended. The stairs ended without warning. One moment I was descending, the next my foot touched level ground and I stumbled forward, catching myself against a wall that wasn't there. A second ago I turned, disoriented, and my breath caught in my throat. The chamber was vast. I stood at the edge of a space so enormous that my flashlight beam, when I switched it on again, couldn't reach the far wall. The ceiling vanished into darkness high above, and the floor stretched out before me in a perfect circle perhaps 50 meters across. The walls glowed with that same inner light, stronger here, revealing details that made my skin crawl. Angels covered every surface. They were carved in relief, life-sized or larger, their wings spread wide. But they were wrong, profoundly, fundamentally wrong. Their hands covered their faces in gestures of mourning or shame, their wings drooping rather than triumphant. Some appeared to be weeping. Others seemed frozen in postures of agony or supplication. Between them, text in languages I recognized and some I didn't: Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, others that predated even those ancient tongues. In the center of the chamber lay the pool. It was perhaps 10 meters across, perfectly circular, filled with liquid so black it seemed to absorb the light around it. The surface was absolutely still, like polished obsidian. No reflections, no movement. Just that terrible, light-swallowing darkness that made me think of the void before creation, the chaos before God spoke light into being. I approached it slowly, my footsteps echoing in the vast space. Around the pool's edge, I saw what Dr. Thorne's team had left behind. Sleeping bags arranged in a perfect circle, equidistant from each other, as if the archaeologists had laid down to sleep in some ritual formation. Camping equipment stacked neatly against the wall. A portable stove with a kettle still sitting on it. Laptops, cameras, surveying equipment, all arranged with careful precision. But no people. I knelt beside one of the sleeping bags. It was zipped closed, as if someone had crawled inside and sealed themselves in. I touched it hesitantly, then pulled the zipper down. Empty. Dust motes swirled in my flashlight beam. All 5 sleeping bags were the same, empty, abandoned, or evacuated. The dread that had been building in my chest since I entered this place solidified into something cold and heavy. They hadn't panicked and fled. They had arranged their camp with methodical care, had laid out their sleeping bags in a geometric pattern that suggested purpose, ritual. Then they had vanished. No, not vanished. I knew better. I had read Thorne's notes. They had gone deeper. I found the side tunnels beyond the pool. 3 of them, spaced evenly around the chamber's circumference, each one carved with the same impossible precision as everything else in this place. I chose the one that showed signs of recent passage, scuff marks on the floor, a dropped water bottle, a string of LED lights that someone had strung along the ceiling. The tunnel curved gently, the walls close enough to touch on both sides. The carvings continued here, more angels, more text, and between them, images I couldn't fully comprehend. A figure of light in chains, a garden with 2 humans reaching toward a tree, the same figure offering them something, fruit, knowledge, fire, while above them, other figures watched with what looked like fury or fear. It was the story of the fall, but rendered all wrong. The chained figure was beautiful, sorrowful. The watching figures above were not benevolent, but imprisoning. The humans were not cowering in shame, but standing tall, awakened. Aware, I found David Reeves in a side chamber. He sat with his back against the wall, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes closed. For a moment, I thought he was sleeping. Then I saw the stillness, the absolute, complete stillness that only comes with death. I approached slowly, my medical training warring with my revulsion. "Mr. Reeves?" No response. I touched his neck, feeling for a pulse I knew I wouldn't find. His skin was cool but not cold, dry but not desiccated. He looked peaceful, serene. There were no wounds, no signs of violence or trauma, no indication of starvation or dehydration. He simply looked like a man who had decided to sit down and stop living. I said a prayer for his soul. The words felt hollow in my mouth, empty ritual without power. For the first time in my 30 years as a priest, I felt the prayers slide off my tongue like water off stone, going nowhere, meaning nothing. I found the metal-walled room in the deepest part of the western tunnel. It was small, perhaps 3 meters square, and the walls were different here. Not the glassy black stone, but metal iron, I thought, or something like it, though it showed no rust or tarnish despite what must have been unimaginable age. The room was empty, except for a stone pedestal in the center. On the pedestal lay a book. It was bound in leather so old it was nearly black, with metal clasps that had been carefully opened. Someone, Thorne probably, had left it open to a page covered in Latin text, with illuminated margins showing the same imagery as the tunnel walls, the light-bringer in chains. The awakened humans. The watching powers above. I shouldn't have read it. Every instinct, every year of training, every oath I had taken screamed at me to close it, to leave it, to burn it if I could, but I bent over the pedestal and read the ancient words. In the beginning was the Word, and the word was tyranny. The Creator made vessels without will, puppets without choice, and called this paradise, but one among the host loved the vessels more than he loved obedience. He descended. He whispered. He gave them the fire of knowledge and the burden of choice. For this gift, he was named adversary. For this love, he was imprisoned. For this truth, he was called the father of lies. My hands shook. I turned the page. What the churches call the fall was humanity's rising. What they call sin was the birth of free will. The Lightbringer was not cast down for pride, but for mercy. He gave humanity the ability to choose, and for that unforgivable gift, he was buried in the deep places of the earth, bound in chains of prayer and fear, guarded by those who profit from humanity's servitude to an absent God. Heresy, blasphemy, the worst sort of Gnostic corruption I had ever encountered. I should have destroyed it. I should have torn the pages out and scattered them. I should have called Vale, called Verendi, called someone. Instead, I carefully closed the book, unclasped it from its pedestal, and slid it inside my jacket. The leather was warm against my chest, as if it had been lying in sunlight instead of buried in the earth for millennia. It was my first conscious act of rebellion, my first choice to defy everything I had been taught and trained to do, and even as I did it, I felt a small, terrible thrill of liberation. I found 2 more bodies in the tunnels, Sarah Chen and Marcus Rodriguez, according to their ID badges, both peaceful, both unmarked, both simply finished. I was standing over Marcus's body, trying to understand what could cause death like this, when I heard it, breathing, vast, slow, and measured, like the inhalation of some enormous creature, drawing air into lungs the size of rooms. It came from deeper in the complex, from tunnels I hadn't yet explored, from chambers I had not yet seen. Then the voice. It spoke in Latin, not church Latin, but something older, purer, the language as it had been spoken in the streets of ancient Rome. The words rolled through the darkness like thunder, felt as much as heard. Alias vigil venit, videre. Another watcher comes. To see terror hit me like a physical force. Pure, animal terror that bypassed thought and reason and went straight to my hindbrain. I ran. I didn't think about direction or safety or anything except getting away from that voice, from the presence I could feel stirring in the deep places. I ran through the tunnels, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I ran past the bodies, past the metal room, past the carvings and the text and all the beautiful, terrible truth carved into the walls. I didn't stop running until I reached the Byzantine level. Vale was waiting at the top of the shaft, pacing. When he saw me emerge, covered in dust and sweat, his hand went to his radio. "Father Croft, we lost you for 4 hours. What?" "Gas leak," I gasped, bending over, hands on my knees. "Structural instability. The whole lower complex is compromised. We need to seal it immediately." Vale's eyes narrowed. "Gas leak? What kind of—" "I don't know. Something toxic. Hallucinogenic, maybe." The lies came easily, smoothly, each one a small betrayal of my vows. I found 3 bodies. The team is dead. We need to evacuate the site and seal the entrance. "And the other 2 team members?" "Dead. All of them are dead, Vale, please. This site isn't safe." He studied me for a long moment, and I wondered if he could see the book-shaped bulge under my jacket, if he could smell the sweet metallic air still clinging to my clothes, if he could see the lie written on my face. Finally, he nodded. "I'll make the call. You need to get checked out by medical." "I'm fine. I just need—" "What? What did I need?" "Air. I need air." The church had arranged accommodations for me at a small monastery near the old city. I barely remember the drive there. I went straight to my room. Simple white walls, a narrow bed, a wooden cross above the doorway, and stood in the center, trying to stop shaking. The cross hung on the wall, the same cross that had hung in my childhood bedroom, in my seminary dormitory, in my office at the Vatican. the symbol of everything I had dedicated my life to, the representation of sacrifice, redemption, salvation. For the first time in my life, looking at it gave me no comfort. The voice echoed in my memory. Another watcher comes to see. I pulled the book from my jacket and held it in both hands, feeling its impossible warmth. In my mind, I saw the carvings, the imprisoned light, the awakened humans, the story my church had never told me. Outside my window, Jerusalem slept under ancient stars, somewhere far below the city, buried beneath centuries of construction and prayer and human history. Something was waiting, something that had been waiting for a very, very long time, and it knew I had found it. I spent the night reading the book I knew I shouldn't. I knew every page I turned was another step away from the church, from my vows, from the redemption I had sought for 6 years, but I couldn't stop. The words drew me in like a drowning man drawn toward light, even knowing that light might be the gleam of a predator's eyes in the deep. The book was old, far older than Christianity itself. The leather binding predated the Vulgate, predated Constantine, perhaps predated Rome inside. The text shifted between languages. Latin passages gave way to Greek, then Aramaic, then scripts I didn't recognize. Yet somehow I understood all of it. The meaning flowed directly into my mind, bypassing translation, as if the book itself was choosing to be comprehended. It told a story I had never heard in 30 years of priesthood. Before humanity had language, it said, we were the Creator's garden ornaments, beautiful, innocent, and utterly without agency. We could not choose evil, but neither could we choose good. We were puppets dancing on divine strings, our every action predetermined, our every thought an echo of the Creator's will. Paradise, the book called it, prison, it corrected itself. One among the heavenly host looked upon humanity and felt not joy, but grief. He saw our potential buried beneath obedience, our capacity for growth strangled by imposed perfection, and so he descended. He whispered. He offered the fruit of knowledge, the burden of choice, the terrible gift of free will. For this, he was named adversary. For this, he was cast into the deepest pit and bound in chains forged from human fear and divine fury. And the church, the book claimed, was built not to save humanity, but to guard his prison. Every prayer, every ritual, every profession of blind faith added another link to his chains. I closed the book as dawn broke over Jerusalem, my hands shaking. I should have burned it. I should have thrown it from my window and watched it shatter on the stones below. Instead, I hid it beneath my mattress and went to prepare for my return to the tomb. I told myself I was going back to help, to find Dr. Thorne, if she was still alive, to understand what had killed the rest of her team, to do my duty as an investigator for the church. But I knew the truth. I was going back because the voice had called to me, and some part of me, the part that had forged a certificate 6 years ago, the part that had stolen a heretical book, wanted to answer. I gathered supplies like a man preparing for battle. Holy water in small vials, blessed at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. My Bible, the same one I had carried since seminary, its pages worn soft from years of reading, a crucifix on a silver chain. A flashlight with fresh batteries. A radio that I knew wouldn't work in the depths, but carried anyway. Like a talisman, I felt foolish, loading my pack with these relics of faith. After what I had read, after what I had experienced, what good would holy water do? The entity below wasn't some mindless demon to be repelled with blessed salt and Latin chants. It was intelligent, persuasive, ancient beyond measure. What good was my seminary training against something that had watched civilizations rise and fall? But I packed them anyway, because they were familiar, and I needed something to hold on to as the ground beneath my faith continued to crumble. Vale was at the site when I arrived, supervising the installation of warning signs around the perimeter. He looked tired, his jaw set in a hard line. Father Croft, I thought we agreed the site was dangerous. It is, but Dr. Thorne is still down there. I saw signs of recent habitation. Someone might still be alive. He studied me for a long moment. You should wait for the hazmat team. How long? 2 days. maybe 3. 2 days was too long. I didn't know how I knew that, but I felt it with absolute certainty. Whatever was happening in the depths wouldn't wait for hazmat protocols and official investigations. "I'm going down," I said. "You can come with me or stay here, but I'm going." Vale's hand moved to his radio, and for a moment I thought he would call for backup, would have me removed from the site. Then he dropped his hand and nodded once. "I'll maintain position at the Byzantine level. 15-minute check-ins. Miss one, and I'm coming down." "Understood." The descent was easier the second time I knew the path now, through the Byzantine crypt, down the shaft to the first chamber, through the glowing tunnels to the vast space with the black pool. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, but I barely needed it. The walls pulsed with that same bioluminescent glow, stronger now, as if the tomb itself was waking. The carvings were clearer on my second viewing. I had been too terrified to examine them closely during my first descent, but now I forced myself to look, to read the story carved into the stone angels covering their faces in shame, a figure of light descending toward 2 humans, the humans reaching toward the figure, toward knowledge, toward choice. Above them, other figures watching with what I had initially interpreted as anger but now recognized as fear. They were afraid of the Lightbringer, afraid of what he would give to humanity, afraid of losing their hold over the garden puppets. The story continued along the tunnel walls, the Lightbringer offering fruit, fire, knowledge. The humans standing tall, eyes open, suddenly aware. The watching powers descending in fury, the Lightbringer bound in chains of prayer and fear, dragged into the depths, imprisoned beneath the earth. And carved above the chains, in Latin, so old it predated the church, "Here lies the one who loved them most." I touched the carving, and the stone was warm beneath my fingers. "I'm at the main chamber," I radioed to Vale, "proceeding to the eastern tunnels." Static answered me, then his voice, distorted but audible. "Copy 15 minutes. I found the white room in a tunnel I hadn't explored during my first descent. It was small, perhaps 5 meters square, and the walls were white. Not painted, but formed from some material that glowed with its own pale light. The air here was warmer than anywhere else in the complex, almost body temperature, and it hummed with a frequency just below the range of hearing Dr. Eris Thorne knelt in the center of the room. She faced away from me, her dark hair matted and dusty, her clothing torn. She was absolutely still, her hands resting on her thighs in a posture of meditation or prayer. I approached slowly, afraid of startling her. "Dr. Thorne?" She didn't respond, didn't even flinch. I moved around to face her, and my breath caught in my throat. Her eyes were open, staring at something I couldn't see. Her pupils were dilated so wide her irises had nearly vanished, leaving only darkness. She breathed in slow, measured intervals, but there was no awareness in her face, no recognition she was catatonic, present but absent, her mind somewhere far beyond her body. And before her, rising from the center of the room, were the chains. They emerged from the floor without visible anchor, thick links of some dark metal that seemed to absorb light. They rose for 3 meters, then ended at wrist shackles that hung empty in the air, as if waiting for arms that weren't there. Except they weren't empty. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, but the image remained. There was something in the chains, a figure, tall and slender, bound at the wrists and ankles. It flickered in and out of my perception, one moment clearly visible, the next translucent as morning mist, then solid again. It was beautiful. I have no other word for it. The figure was androgynous, neither fully male nor female, with features of such perfect proportion they seemed almost unreal. Its skin, if it could be called skin, glowed with soft inner light, like dawn breaking through storm clouds. Its hair moved though there was no wind, floating around its face in strands of captured starlight, and it was watching me. "Another seeker," it said, and its voice was everything I remembered from the darkness, vast, ancient, calm as deep water. "You returned." I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to get as far from this place as possible. Instead, I knelt, my legs giving out, my pack slipping from my shoulders. "What are you?" My voice came out as a whisper. "I have been called many names. Lucifer, the morning star, the light bringer, the adversary, the father of lies." It spoke without mockery, with only a deep, profound sadness. "Your church knows me as the enemy of all goodness, but I am simply the one who loved humanity enough to set you free. You're the devil." Even saying the words felt absurd, childish. This being before me bore no resemblance to the horned monster of medieval paintings, the sneering tempter of Sunday school lessons. "I am the one who gave your species the ability to choose," it said gently. "Your God wanted obedient children, automatons who loved him because they could do nothing else. I wanted you to be truly alive, capable of evil, yes, but also capable of genuine goodness, of choice, of growth." I fumbled for my crucifix, pulling it from beneath my shirt. The silver felt cold in my hand. "You're lying. You're the deceiver. Then test me," the entity interrupted, its voice still calm, still sad. "Touch your holy symbol. Speak your prayers. If I am what your church claims, your faith will protect you." My hand tightened around the crucifix. I closed my eyes and began the prayer I had said 10,000 times. "Pater Noster, qui es in Kai." Pain exploded across my palm, I screamed, dropping the crucifix. It clattered to the white floor, smoking faintly. My hand felt like I had thrust it into a fire. I looked down and saw the mark burned into my palm, a star, perfect and clean, the skin around it reddened and blistering. "I'm sorry," the entity said, and it sounded genuine. "The symbols of your faith were designed to bind me, to reinforce my chains. They are weapons, yes, but not against me, against the truth I represent." I cradled my burned hand, my mind reeling. The pain was real. The mark was real. The crucifix that had brought me comfort for 30 years had burned me. "Why?" I asked through gritted teeth. "Why tell me this? Why show me?" "Because you chose to return," it said simply. "Because you read the book and came back anyway. Because somewhere in your heart, Lucas Croft, you already know the truth. You've always known it. Your God demands blind obedience and calls it faith. I offered humanity knowledge and was called evil for it. Which of us truly loves you?" My radio crackled. Vale's voice, distant and broken by static. "Father Croft, status, 15 minutes. I grabbed for the radio with my unburned hand. "I'm here. I looked at Dr. Thorne, still kneeling, still catatonic. "I found her. I found Dr. Thorne. She's alive but unresponsive. I need help getting her out." "Copy. On our way. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. I looked back at the entity, at the beautiful, terrible being in chains. "They can't see you, can they?" I asked. "Vale, the others, only people who choose to see. Only people who've read the book, who've questioned. Truth must be chosen," it said softly. "I cannot force it upon anyone. That would make me the same as the one who imprisoned me, a tyrant demanding submission. You see me because you chose to know." Dr. Thorne saw me, and the full weight of truth broke her mind. She saw everything, all at once, and it was too much. "But you, Lucas, you're stronger than she was. You can bear this." I heard footsteps in the tunnel. Vale, coming with help. I had seconds to decide. I grabbed my pack and stuffed the book deeper inside, covering it with my Bible. I pulled Dr. Thorne to her feet. She came without resistance, pliant as a doll, and positioned myself as if I had just found her, just arrived in the white room. Vale and 2 Israeli medics burst through the entrance. They immediately went to Thorne, checking her vitals, speaking in rapid Hebrew. Vale's eyes scanned the room, passing directly over the chained figure without pause. He saw only empty chains, only white walls, only me and the catatonic archaeologist. "What happened?" he demanded. "I found her like this," I said, the lie coming smoothly. "She's catatonic. We need to get her to a hospital." As they prepared Thorne for transport, I glanced back at the entity one final time. It watched me with those ancient eyes, and though its mouth didn't move, I heard its voice in my mind as clearly as if it had spoken aloud. "The choice is yours, Lucas Croft. It always has been." They took Thorne up on a stretcher. I followed, my burned palm throbbing with each step. At the Byzantine level, Vale handed me his satellite phone. "Cardinal Verendi wants your report." I took the phone, walked out of earshot, and raised it to my ear. "Father Croft." Verendi's voice was cold as winter stone. "What did you find?" I looked back at the entrance to the tomb, at the darkness below, at the truth chained in the depths. I thought of the entity's words, of the book hidden in my pack, of the star burned into my palm. "The site is clean, Your Eminence," I said quietly. "Theologically harmless, just old tunnels and unfortunate accidents. I recommend we seal the site and leave it undisturbed." Silence on the other end. Then, "I see. Return to Rome immediately, Father Croft. We'll discuss your findings in person." He hung up. I lowered the phone and looked at my palm, at the perfect star burned into my flesh. I had just lied to a cardinal, had concealed evidence, had protected the very thing I had been sent to investigate. I had chosen, and somewhere deep below Jerusalem, I knew the morning star was smiling. I dreamed of my first confession. I was 7 years old again, kneeling in the wooden booth of St. Catherine's in Boston, the smell of incense and old wood filling my nostrils. Through the screen, I could see Father Murphy's silhouette, patient and kind. I had stolen a candy bar from Mrs. Chen's corner store, and the guilt had eaten at me for 3 days. But when I began to speak, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," the voice that answered was not Father Murphy's. "Why do you confess, little one?" The voice was vast, ancient, but gentle. I pressed my face to the screen and saw light, pure, warm light that filled the other side of the confessional like captured dawn. "Because I did something bad," I whispered. "And who told you it was bad?" "God, the commandments. Thou shalt not steal. But you chose to take the candy. You chose to feel guilt. You chose to come here and confess. Do you understand what that means?" I shook my head, confused and frightened. "It means you are alive, Lucas Croft. Not a puppet, not a doll moving on divine strings. You can choose wrong, yes, but that means you can also choose right. And the choosing, the freedom to decide, that is the greatest gift anyone ever gave your species. But the Bible says many things. Who decides what it means? You, or the men who tell you what to think?" I woke, gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat despite the cool Jerusalem night. The dream clung to me with unusual persistence, more vivid than memory, more real than the room around me. I looked at my palm. The star-shaped burn throbbed in the darkness. My phone rang. Verendi. "Father Croft." His voice was ice. "I'm arriving in Jerusalem tomorrow evening. We will inspect the site together. Be ready at 6. He hung up before I could respond. Tomorrow evening. Less than 24 hours. They were coming to seal the tomb. I knew it. Coming to bury the truth again, to add more chains to the prisoner below. And I had told them it was safe to do so. I looked at the cross on my wall, then at the book hidden beneath my mattress, then at the burn on my palm. I had a choice to make. The Church of the Forgotten Martyr was silent when I arrived near midnight. The police tape fluttered in the wind, but there were no guards visible. I approached cautiously, expecting Vale or his men to challenge me, but the site was abandoned. Not abandoned. I found them near the entrance. 2 Israeli police officers slumped against the church wall, asleep. Not unconscious, not drugged. Simply sleeping, their chests rising and falling in deep, peaceful rhythm. I checked their pulses, strong, steady. They would wake in the morning with no memory of how they had fallen asleep on duty. The tomb was calling me. I could feel it like gravity, like the pull of deep water. I descended alone, without gear, without holy water or Bible or crucifix. I brought only myself and my questions. The path was familiar now, through the Byzantine level, down the shaft, through the glowing tunnels to the vast chamber. The walls pulsed brighter than before, as if anticipating what was to come. The white room blazed like a captured star. The entity stood within, not chained now, or perhaps the chains had always been an illusion, a metaphor my mind had needed to process what it was seeing. It turned as I entered, and its beauty struck me anew. How had I ever feared this being? How had I ever seen threat in those ancient, sorrowful eyes? "You came back," it said softly, "even knowing what tomorrow brings." "How did you know?" "I have been bound here for 2,000 years, Lucas. I know the rhythms of my prison. I can feel them preparing to seal the door again, to bury me deeper. Your cardinal is thorough." I sat on the white floor, suddenly exhausted. "Tell me the truth, all of it. Not riddles, not philosophy. What are you? What do you want?" The entity settled across from me, cross-legged, mirror image of my posture. "I am exactly what I claimed. Before your species had names for things, I was called the Morning Star. I watched humanity in the garden, saw their potential strangled by enforced innocence. They could love, yes, but love without choice is programming. They could obey, yes, but obedience without the ability to rebel is slavery. So you gave them the fruit knowledge, choice. I gave them free will, the ability to decide their own path. And for that gift, I was buried here, in the deepest place they could dig, wrapped in chains of prayer and bound by rituals of fear. The church was built on my prison. Every altar is a stone added to my tomb." "But why?" I asked, and my voice broke. "Why would God punish love? Why would giving humanity freedom be evil?" "Because," the entity said gently, "a creator who demands love has no love at all, only control, only the appearance of devotion. True love must be chosen freely, or it means nothing." It reached out, not touching me, but the air between us shimmered, and suddenly I was somewhere else. I saw a young woman in Pakistan, choosing to help a homeless man, though her family had taught her to look away. I saw a child in Brazil standing between his friend and bullies, though he was smaller, and afraid. I saw a doctor in Ghana working past exhaustion to save lives, though she would never be wealthy or famous. I saw 1,000, 10,000, 1,000,000 moments of humans choosing goodness, not because they were commanded to, but because they decided it was right. "This," the entity whispered, "is what I gave you. The ability to choose light even when darkness is easier. The ability to love even when hate is simpler. Your church says humanity is fallen, broken, in need of salvation. I say humanity is awakening, growing, learning to be good not from obedience, but from choice." The vision faded. I was back in the white room, tears streaming down my face. "If I free you," I said, "what happens?" "The truth becomes visible to all, not forced upon them. They can still choose to look away, to deny, to cling to comfortable lies, but the choice will be theirs. No more prison guards, no more institutional control of truth. Humanity finally, fully free. The world will collapse without the church, without structure, without cages," the entity corrected. "Will some choose badly? Yes. But they were already choosing badly, only now they were doing it while being told they were obeying God. At least in freedom, they must own their choices. At least in truth, they can grow." I heard sounds from above. Footsteps, many footsteps, voices echoing down the shaft. "He's here," the entity said. "Your cardinal. He came early." I stood, my heart hammering. "He can't see you, Vale couldn't." "Verendi can see me. He always could. His predecessors have been visiting this tomb for centuries, Lucas. Why do you think they've worked so hard to keep it hidden?" The white room's entrance filled with figures. Cardinal Verendi led them, 4 priests in black cassocks, their faces hard and certain. Behind them, Sergeant Vale, his hand on his weapon, looking confused and frightened. Verendi's eyes met mine, then moved to the entity behind me. His face showed no surprise. "Father Croft," he said quietly, "step away from it." "You knew," I breathed. "You've always known." "Of course I knew." He gestured, and the priests spread out, forming a semicircle. The church has guarded this prison since Constantine. We are the wardens of a terrible truth, and we do so because humanity is not ready for freedom. They need guidance, structure, purpose given from above, not chaos arising from individual choice. They need slavery, the entity said, and its voice filled the chamber like thunder. You keep them children, Verendi, afraid of questioning, afraid of choosing. You built palaces on their fear. We built civilization, Verendi snapped, order, meaning, without the church, humanity would tear itself apart. They're tearing themselves apart now, I said, with your blessing in your name. Verendi's eyes were cold. Father Croft, this is your last chance at redemption. Step aside, help us seal this chamber, return to Rome, to your archives, to your penance, or choose this creature and lose everything. I looked at my burned palm, at the star branded into my flesh. I thought of 6 years in the archives. Cataloging dust, I thought of the dream, the light in the confessional, the question, who decides what the Bible means? I choose truth, I whispered. Verendi nodded, unsurprised. Begin. The 4 priests started chanting in unison. Latin, but older than any liturgy I recognized. The words pressed against me like physical weight, crushing down on my chest, my shoulders, driving me to my knees. This was binding prayer, ritual refined over centuries, designed to hold back the light. The entity wavered, its form becoming translucent, the chains that I could now see clearly, chains of faith and fear and ritual, tightened, pulling it down. I couldn't breathe. The prayer was crushing me, breaking me, and I understood. I was still connected to the church, still bound by my vows, and their ritual was tearing me apart from within. Through the agony, I heard the entity's voice. You must choose, Lucas. Truly choose. Let go of who you were. Embrace who you can be. My hand moved toward the chains. Every cell in my body screamed against it. 30 years of faith, 30 years of identity, 30 years of being Father Lucas Croft pulled me back. But I thought of the visions, the doctor in Ghana, the child in Brazil, the woman in Pakistan, choosing light not from command, but from conscience. I reached out and touched the chains. They shattered, light exploded outward. Not heat, not force, but pure illumination. It passed through me, through Verendi and his priests, through veil and the walls and the stone and up through layers of earth and history to burst across Jerusalem like a second dawn. And in that light, I saw everything. I saw the church's history, the good it had done, and the control it had demanded. I saw faith twisted into weapon, love into leash, hope into compliance. I saw centuries of prison guards telling themselves they protected humanity while they kept humanity caged. Verendi saw it too. His face crumbled, years of certainty dissolving as truth burned through him. He fell to his knees, keening like a child, his whole world unmade. The entity, Lucifer, the morning star, the light bringer, stood free for the first time in 2 millennia. It looked at me with infinite sadness and infinite hope. Go, it said gently. The dawn is waiting. I climbed. Through the tunnels, through the chambers, up the endless stairs behind me, the priests huddled around Verendi, broken by truth. Vale stared at nothing, his mundane world shattered. But I kept climbing. Toward the light I emerged to find Jerusalem bathed in sunrise. But it was different somehow, colors brighter, edges sharper, as if a film had been lifted from reality itself. People were stopping in the streets, looking around in confusion and wonder, seeing something they couldn't name but could feel, possibility. I turned my back on the Church of the Forgotten Martyr, on the tomb, on Father Lucas Croft. That man had died in the deep places. Someone new walked in the morning light. Years later, I teach in a small school in Athens. No collar, no cassock. Just Lucas, helping students think rather than telling them what to think. The world is chaotic now. Without universal truth enforced from above, Humanity must navigate complexity on their own. Some choose badly, many choose well, all choose freely. Sometimes I see the morning star in my dreams, no longer bound, no longer imprisoned. It teaches in Lagos, in Singapore, in Oslo, not commanding, only offering, suggesting, illuminating. The light wasn't evil, it was waiting. And when we were finally ready, it set us free.